Hello and welcome to this video on what a hangover is. A hangover is the consequences of a heavy night's drinking, generally. The signs and symptoms include a painful headache, sensitivity to light and noises, nausea, and thirst among so many others. All of these symptoms are caused by the brain being deprived of water and becoming somewhat dehydrated. The dehydration is a consequence of imbibing alcohol, which has a direct diuretic effect. Diuresis is otherwise known as an increased urination. The increased urination leads to loss of body fluids. Increased loss of fluids causes the body to lose solutes in the form of electrolytes. This further increases the rate at which water leaves the neurons. This is what then causes the brain to become dehydrated. Central nervous system dehydration is the basic cause of most of the signs and symptoms. The first and perhaps most immediately that you'll feel is the headache. And this is because dehydration is caused by the body trying to recover as much water as it can to keep blood pressure up and circulation going. The easiest place to get water from is from the brain. The brain has a very high concentration of water. It needs this in order to have everything running the way it should. The problem is, once you begin taking water away from everywhere else in the body, the brain also has to sacrifice some. This results in the brain becoming constricted. That causes then the brain to begin not only experiencing cell disruption in function, but that function is both perceived as pain itself, but interferes with other functions. When you then have parts of the brain pulling in awkward ways due to the constriction from dehydration, you exacerbate this effect. The brain loses fluid for the first and simplest reason. Alcohol dilates blood vessels in and around the brain. These increased blood vessels, because of their greater size, need to be filled, and that volume has to come in the form of water. That water comes out of the brain, and that's a form of osmosis. Osmosis moves water from the brain into the blood vessels to dilute out the proteins and cells that are within it. This is generally a process that reaches an equilibrium, but because the blood vessels have been dilated and the body lacks water due to the increased urination, the demand in those blood vessels is much more than normal, and it means the brain has to give up that water. We then need to talk about the diuretic effect of alcohol. This is perhaps the biggest problem you'll have, and the biggest cause of one of the issues you face. All that loss of fluid that could otherwise have been accounted for. Generally speaking, the amount of alcohol you drink corresponds directly to the amount of fluid you lose. This means that by drinking alcohol, you do become dehydrated, even if you've consumed what seems to be a large amount of alcoholic beverages in volume. Drinking 50 grams or approximately 2 standard drinks of alcohol causes the body to lose between 600 and 1000 milliliters of water, or 0.6 to 1 liter. Considering that one standard drink of alcohol in the form of beer, cider or similar at about 3.5 to 4% alcohol by volume is approximately 300 milliliters, you are losing between 3 and up to 4 times the volume of fluid from your body when you drink. The loss of this fluid has to also then take out other materials because it is the only way to get water to go where the body wants it to go. Primarily we're talking about things like sodium, potassium and other salts. These are important not just because they allow the kidneys to remove the water from the body, but they play a very important role in nerve and muscle function. This is yet another way in which urination and the changes in solutes within your blood leads to issues with nerve function, especially in the brain. Without both sodium and potassium, the brain is unable to function properly because nerves can't conduct signals along the axon. This is otherwise known as propagating an action potential. As a consequence, the brain begins to have difficulties working, and the damage to the cells that occurs as a result is another cause for pain. Alcohol also causes systemic inflammation, which increases further issues to do with the body's demand for drawing water out of organs and into the bloodstream. Inflammation also would have the same effect in causing headaches. This is why when you get something like a fever, you tend to experience a headache. Alcohol affects the release of neurotransmitters as a result of impacting on the action potential, but also interfering with the neurons themselves. This includes transmitters and hormones. Things like, say, histamine, serotonin, and prostaglandin. All of these have roles in inflammation and can cause headaches. That's just the very first of the symptoms you experience and the biggest. Sensitivity to light occurs because the pathways between the eyeball and the brain are very clear-cut, and the activities involved in getting a signal from the eye to the back of the brain in the occipital lobe are going to be very well established and prioritized. This means activating them when they're otherwise having difficulty sending signals is kind of like trying to overload any other system where you need to get a stronger signal. You can do it, but it causes damage. Noise has the same effect. Nausea is a result of the different parts of the brain not cooperating, along with issues to do with the GI tract arising from the effects of imbibing alcohol. Finally, there's thirst, and this one is relatively self-explanatory. You're thirsty because you're dehydrated because alcohol causes the body to try and get rid of more fluid than it should by inhibiting the antidiuretic hormone responsible for trying to reduce urination frequency and volume. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions that you have below.